Gabe, I think we should talk about food on the podcast today, specifically restaurants. And I want to kick things off by asking you, Gabe, when you go to a restaurant, maybe you're by yourself or maybe you're with family, but what's the first thing you do? Because I'm curious to know if we have the same answer or not.
Well, I guess it depends on whether I am like with my wife and we're on a date or if I'm with my kids. So
I'm starting to realize that the way I set this question up, we're gonna have very different answers.
we are going to have very different answers. So if I'm with my kids, so we just went to a restaurant last week with the kids. And generally, when it's with the kids, it's just trying to make sure that they don't destroy said restaurant or act like complete little maniacs to get us kicked out of said restaurant. So when I'm with my family, that's generally my focus. We are going out tomorrow night as well for my nephew's birthday. And it's probably going to be a lot of the same thing where I'm just trying to corral them to make sure that everything's okay. When I'm with my wife, it's, hey, let's sit down and get me a cocktail as rapidly as possible because it's very rare that we actually get to go out on dates. So usually we're trying to, sit and enjoy ourselves.
That's fascinating, and man, do we have different answers. But the reason I bring this up, and I'll answer the question as well, but I was listening to a podcast, and one of the examples they used when they were talking about customer experience was how, as a restaurant owner or as a business owner, you want to curate that customer experience so that people, in this case, the restaurant, don't come in and just sit on their phones, right? Like, what's the experience of the restaurant? And I asked that question. I asked what you do at the restaurants, and I'm guilty of this now. I'm more so with family. When I'm with broader family, I'm not a bad person, but I will absolutely grab my phone and maybe spend some time on my phone. And I feel like the pandemic maybe made this worse because of the QR code
100%.
menus. If you recall this at all,
Yes, exactly.
we were kind of
They,
trained to just pull out our phones automatically. Now, and if I'm in a
mhm.
one-on-one situation with my future wife, I'm not going to spend all this time on my phone. So the more I thought about that, I thought, what a great example. And it really makes you think, number one, should I be on my phone when I'm at dinner? No.
No,
But number two, what is the experience that restaurants strive to create? Gabe, we have been at some fairly nice restaurants together, or as we travel and do things. And I can think of a ton of restaurants where I never even thought about pulling out my phone. But
hmm
you go to the same restaurant where it's the same. I always joke about the local economy of my town. Downtown being all about hamburgers because every restaurant is beef, and that's all. But I think of, like, you get into this very standard customer experience, and you fall into that trap of, in the restaurant case, pulling out my phone and sitting
hmm
on my phone. I remember a dinner a year ago where me and the person I was with, we basically just sat on our phones. We were hungry. It was late. And that was that. But again, going back to this
Is this a
example of,
bad? Is this a bad date, Zach? Is this like a
oh no,
confession
that
of a
was that
terrible
was with my
date?
dad. That was
Oh, okay.
we had already talked about broadband for the day. But it just goes back to, what is your customer experience? And I think that's what I want to talk about today, Gabe. Well, a couple things. Number one, why is customer experience important? And
Hmm.
then for the marketers listening to the podcast, and for my colleagues' moms listening to the podcast, talk about how marketing influences everything, customer experience throughout your entire organization.
I think it's a great topic, and it sort of aligns nicely with the session that we had with a gentleman from Jade last week around how they think about all of these different touch points in their business. And I think it's a really great point you bring up, Zach, which is marketing touches everything, or at least it should touch everything. And as the marketer in the organization, it's really important for you to understand what are all of the touch points that are happening across that entire customer journey so that you can align a delightful experience across that entire journey. To go back to the restaurant example, as soon as, well, maybe even before that, when somebody calls to get a reservation, or when they go online to get a reservation, as soon as they walk in the door, what is that experience like, all the way through until they're walking out the door? What's that last impression that you're going to leave? There was a restaurant that we used to go to a lot. This was quite a while ago because it's not even in business anymore. But one of the things they would always do, and it was a nicer restaurant, but it wasn't like insanely expensive, right? Like you could go, nice meal for, two people for, 100 to $150, right? Depending on how much, whether you ordered a nice bottle of wine. But the thing they always did when you left is they gave you this little muffin. It was like this little additional treat that they would give you as you were walking out. You'd pay your bill, and then they would come and they would drop it off, and you'd get to go home with this little additional treat. And I always thought that was so brilliant because it just left such a perfect and wonderful impression when you were leaving of that great experience. And it probably cost them like 5 cents to make this and put it on the table for you. But I just thought it was such a great idea and such a great way to elevate the experience that you just had.
Well, not only that, but we'll talk about impressions in a few minutes. But the initial impression too is equally is maybe more important too. But just looking back on customer experience, why is this important? And the reality is, it's critical to the sustained growth of your business. It's building the loyalty. You're retaining customers, and you're building, as we always talk about on the podcast, those brand advocates. And Gabe, it sounds like this restaurant is out of business now, sadly, or has since closed.
It's sad. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I think it was more of a, like the owners didn't want to deal with it anymore. Or they were restaurant business is hard.
But it sounds like you might be an advocate though.
Oh, 100%. I love that place. I miss it. And I had encouraged numerous people to go there because it was, one, good food, but I loved all of those just little additional touches that they had along the way. So definitely was a brand advocate for them when they were around, and I'm sad they're gone. I wish they would reopen.
And that's kind of my next point about customer experience is, and I hate to say this like I'm 100 years old, but back in my day, but no, customers have options. And with the internet, everybody has the ability to educate themselves on what the best product is. They can look at reviews. They can look at, the Google My Business pages, things like that. I have done this so many times this week. Gabe, I've told you I'm furnishing this apartment. Nobody told me that mattresses were so expensive. So I was comparing all these different mattresses. And I'm
sorry, man. I should have warned you that like now that you're a full-on adult, you're going to have to spend thousands of dollars on actual things for your apartment. So I apologize. That's my bad.
I know, not to rewind to the mattress conversation from a year ago, but no one told me how expensive they were. But again, I'm using the internet, the tools available to me to educate myself on what's the best. And Gabe, there's hundreds of restaurants around us. We could eat anywhere we want tonight. Chick-fil-A, of course, McDonald's, why not? But no, we could go downtown, get a nice meal. And again, we have all of these options. But you're going to go back to, well, who did I have the best experience with? Or what was the initial impression or the final impression with the restaurant I ate at last? And all this ties back into how these businesses are marketing the customer experience. Marketing is everything.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. It's touching all of those different things. I think about an experience I had last week while I was traveling. We were looking for a coffee shop and found this place, had good reviews, walked in. Coffee was great. The first impression that I had was incredibly rude and unattentive and disinterested staff as soon as we walked in the door. And me and my colleague I was with, we walked out and we were like, okay, this coffee's good, but I don't think we'll ever be back here because those people were rude. Like it's so off-putting when you end up in an experience like that, where it's just clear that, they did not think at all about, what experience do I actually want to deliver here? And that first impression was not great, but I was really desperately in need of coffee. So I had to stay, and it was good coffee, but I don't think I would be back just because that experience was so terrible.
Yeah, Gabe. And that kind of ties into what I want to talk about next is we have some great examples on, well, you said marketing is everything. Well, what does that mean? And then, once we get through that, I was talking to Gabe and I said, over the past 6 months, 12 months, you and I have had some pretty unique experiences where the customer experience was very important to our buying decision. So I want to talk
Mm-hmm.
through some real life examples that Gabe and I've have gone through, and we talked about the expensive mattress, so we'll expand on that for sure. But marketing is everything. I always say your marketing team should not be working in a bubble. All right, they're not supposed to be siloed from your organization. They should be collaborating with your sales teams, your customer service teams, your install teams if you're in broadband. But these should not be siloed off. And I also like to remind people, because when I this happens a lot when I explain what I do for a living, but marketing is so much more than creating digital ads or emails or signage and posts and things like that. There's so much more to it. And I want to walk through, Gabe, I think, just a few of the examples of where marketing plays an important role in your business.
Yeah, I definitely want to get through those. And as you were talking about the marketing playing such a critical role in collaboration with everyone across the organization, one of the examples that immediately came to mind for me was I've worked with a number of marketers over the years in broadband service providers specifically who have spent a lot of time with their install techs. You mentioned that particular group. Like doing ride-alongs is one of the things that I think is probably the best thing that marketers can do to really get an understanding of what's happening with the customer experience at that really critical touch point of, hey, I'm a new customer and this is the first interaction that I'm having with probably a person, maybe the first interaction that I'm having with a person from this company. And it's a very intimate thing where they're probably coming into your home to do an install. So being my advice, I guess, would be if you're a marketer in a BSP, one of the things you should absolutely be doing is going on ride alongs with your technicians, because you're going to get all kinds of great copy to use in your ads. And you're going to get a really good understanding of what the customer experience is like for those people getting a new install.
It's funny we talk about that, because I joke around with a couple colleagues on our team, Izzy and Shannon both, on the Service Cloud team here at Calix. But one of the things we joke about is I am a marketer. I have a marketing background. I have a marketing degree. I don't have a technical degree, but yet I know how to splice fiber. Or, when I was installing my outdoor Wi-Fi, I was able to run that cable and terminate the Cat6 cable and, build that into my network cabinet in my basement. But all of this was learned, me as a marketer, by spending time with people in those cross-functional roles. So, if you're at a BSP in this case, or really any, business, chat with your CSRs, spend a day working with them. Yeah, when I was at a bank, one of the things we did as part of training, again, I had just graduated. I'm a marketer. I do marketing, graphic design, things like that. I spent a day as a teller. I spent a day in new accounts, setting up new accounts. And, it's great to not only understand how those roles work in your business, but it's a great way, which I'll talk about here in a bit, to create a feedback loop. You
Mm-hmm.
have customers coming, interacting with you, um, talking about your products, talking about their experience with your product. So I think having that feedback loop is a great way to evolve your business.
Couldn't agree more. It's so critical to understand what's really going on, and you can start to see the friction points, I guess would be the maybe the best word to use there, of how it's where it's difficult to do business with you, and you can start to put programs in place to make those things a little bit easier. One of the things I like doing when I go and visit broadband service providers is I like to go and sit in the call center and just listen to calls that are coming in, right? It's a really good learning experience for me of, hey, what are the conversations that are happening? I feel like I have a good idea as to what these are just from the being in the industry for a while, but actually sitting in the call center and listening to the calls that are coming in and the challenges that a CSR is dealing with, and ultimately the challenges that the customer is dealing with on the other end of the phone, it's such a great way to learn, and have a much better understanding of, okay, how can we market to solve some of these problems before the customer even realizes it's an issue.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way. I always use the phrase, suffering in silence. How many of your
Mm-hmm.
subscribers or customers are experiencing these pain points, but are not picking up the phone or not emailing or texting you and
Yeah,
and
a
working
huge
with you?
percentage, by the way, right? I know I've heard statistics around this, and I can't remember the exact number, but I'm pretty confident that it's less than 10% of people will pick up the phone and call to complain when they're having an issue. Whereas basically that means that 90% of people will just suffer in silence until they find a better option, and then they're likely to just bounce. a very, very, very small percentage of people will pick up the phone and call if they have an issue. So if you're sitting in the call center, if you're hearing these consistent issues that are coming up, I can pretty much guarantee you that other customers are having those problems too. They just haven't picked up the phone and call. Mm-hmm. So to get to your feedback loop comment, Zach, which spot on, take all of those things that you're hearing and think about, all right, well, what's a campaign I could create to educate my customers in advance so that they're not just sitting there and suffering in silence, but I'm creating that feedback loop of heard the problem, heard it a few times. Now I need to actually go create some marketing to deal with this.
And speaking of, if we rewind just a little bit here,
sorry, I jumped ahead. I was too excited.
No, you're totally fine. But this fits right in though. But talking about the role of marketers in the organization is, we talked about creating that first impression. You know, what you do is your subscribers, your prospects, their first impression of your brand. That's going to stick with them, and ultimately, it's going to lead into how much trust they place with you. But the kind of follow up role there is engaging your customers. You know, keeping them informed, supported, connected after they make that purchase. So Gabe, we presented in Utah last year on this, but we said, you know, in your customer journey, once you acquire a customer, once you acquire a subscriber, that's not, oh, we're done here and, you know, pack it up and move on to the next. No, now we need to focus on customer retention. What are we doing to retain that customer and turn them into a brand advocate?
Mm-hmm. Well, and especially in a recurring revenue business where your customers may be sticking around for 6, 7, 8 years, there's a lot of opportunity to create meaningful touch points across that journey. And I've said this before, and I will continue to say it many times. Our industry, the broadband service provider space, spends so much time and effort at the beginning of the relationship and then often forgets about the customer after that. We're so focused on acquisition and acquiring customers and making sure that that experience is good. And that's really important. You know, it's certainly the lifeblood to growth, but it can't be the end of the conversation. If the only quote unquote conversation that your customer is having with you every single month is you taking money out of their bank account, eventually they're going to be upset and frustrated and start to look for different options.
And I want to focus on that because that kind of leads into my last point here, but that's about creating that emotional connection with your brand. And when I say emotional connection, we don't want a transactional relationship, right? We don't want that transactional connection, to your point, Gabe, of, oh, there's money leaving my account and that's the end of it, right? Customers who are satisfied are more likely to stay loyal. And again, we want more than a transactional relationship with our customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to, like you said, it's going to build that actual brand loyalty and advocacy by creating those emotional connections. And the other piece of this, Zach, that you, just to go back a quick step on the keeping them informed, keeping them supported, keeping them connected, the keeping them informed piece of this, again, I think is a great opportunity. Our customers don't think about us nearly as much as we think about them, right? Especially in this recurring revenue space that we're in. They bought broadband service maybe 3-4 years ago, and they probably haven't thought about it since, right? It was the purchase that they made at the time, and they probably haven't thought a lot about it since then. It's up to us as marketers to educate them about the new services that we're bringing to market, the new things that might be beneficial for them. I think of a story. I was actually just talking to a colleague earlier this week, and he had gone on a ride along with the technician. And right before he went on the ride along, he was talking about outdoor Wi-Fi to the general manager at this company. And the general manager said, that's not something that our customers are interested in. We don't have people that are interested in that type of product. So he went out on a ride along with, and they did 3 installs in a day. And in every single case, the person said some version of, man, it would be so great if I could get Wi-Fi out of my backyard. I've got this shed that I have my TV hooked up in, and I'd love to be able to watch the football game when I'm out here. Every single one that he went on. And he's like, okay, small sample size, but it's pretty wild that I went on 3 calls and all 3 of them said basically, why can't you provide me outdoor Wi-Fi? So there's oftentimes these assumptions that we make about what people want or don't want, but we need to take a step back and actually start to really listen to our customers about, okay, how can I create those meaningful relationships? If that provider had a technician that said, "Oh, hey, by the way, I've got this outdoor Wi-Fi thing for $10 more a month. I could slap it up, and you're going to be ready to rock and roll." Those customers would be way more happy, way more loyal, and it would be a much more positive experience across the entire relationship.
$10 a month, Gabe. How about pennies a day?
There
Like
you go.
let's talk about that a little bit differently.
Yes,
but
you're right.
That goes,
I messed that up.
Yeah, that's little pricing psychology. We'll have to do another episode on pricing psychology.
I love pricing psychology. So yeah.
Well, I think I've got an expert we can bring in too. So we'll follow up on that one. But this all leads back into good marketing uses data, right? Leverage your customer data to understand your audience. Again, do they want outdoor Wi-Fi? Do they need outdoor Wi-Fi? Predict their needs. Personalize that experience to them. You know how much I love personalizing those experiences. Create that segmentation again, predict churn, and so on. But again, use that data you have. Yeah, we did episodes on zero-party data, first-party data, all this, types of data you can get, behavioral data, demographic data. Use all of that to personalize the experience for every one of your subscribers. You now have this feedback from a technician where, oh, well, maybe we do have people interested in outdoor Wi-Fi. What data do we have that could support this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And going back to the mattress example, I was going to talk about this when you were chatting about this earlier and I forgot. So to bring it kind of full circle to this mattress conversation, I was talking to an acquaintance that was telling me that they were going to look for a new mattress. And I saw them last week, and then I happened to see them this morning as well. And I was like, "Oh, did you end up going to get the new mattress?" And they said, yes, they went to a store. I know this sounds terrible. I already don't like this story, but they went to a store to check out the Sleep Number beds. And you talk about personalization of an experience. So her and her husband laid down on this bed, and they like personalize the, Sleep Number to you, right? And they move it all around. And then she said the other thing that they did is they actually have a screen above, on the ceiling above, that shows you all of the different touch points of your body and like where it's touching the mattress and how it's supporting you and all of these different things. And I was like, oh my God, what a brilliant way to bring data and a personalized experience into a mattress purchase where, again, we can go spend $3,000 on a mattress online, but if you're going to go and make the effort to go to a store and lay down on said mattress, what a great way to personalize that experience.
It almost makes me want to go mattress shopping. Gabe, there's two things here on this. Number one is, do you remember the first thing I said to you this week when I said I was mattress shopping? I asked you for your recommendation, and then do you remember what I asked you next? I said, do you have a referral code?
Oh, you did ask me for the referral code, yes. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah, so there goes.
But I did tell you about sorry, it's going to be more expensive. But I did give you my recommendation based on the one that I bought.
And did I take that seriously? Yeah, I went and looked at them. Now I didn't go shopping because I told you I'm trying to avoid that. But now that I know there's a place,
you immediately hit me up and went, "Oh my God, mattresses are really expensive."
I know that now that I know there's a place where you can like go lay down and see the data. Obviously the data-driven marketer in me is like, "Oh, I have to try this." But oh gosh, well, Gabe, like I promised at the beginning, we've got some fun examples here.
Yes, let's do it.
And the first one is, I feel like this is one we talk about often, but we're at a point now where we can really talk about it. But
big news coming for Zach.
Yeah, big news. How funny would it be if like we just ended the podcast right here? Like
it's called a cliffhanger, man.
Yeah.
Leave people wanting more.
Yeah. Anyway, so thank you for tuning in to Buffer. No. So before I even give the big news, I'm going to rewind to 2020. This is really going to irritate people. But in 2020, I bought a new car. It was a Toyota. In the process of buying said car, I went to a dealership and they didn't have what I wanted, but I test drove a similar model or different trim just to drive and gauge the size and everything. And it was great. It wasn't the color I wanted. It wasn't the interior package I wanted. It wasn't the trim I wanted. There was just options I didn't want. So I got back to the lot and I said, okay, well, this isn't what I want. And the salesperson immediately started to bother me like, oh, well, why don't you like it? I'm like, well, I don't like the color. It's not the trim. And then they said, well, what if we took like $1,000 off for the color? And I'm like, well, part of me was like, oh, well, maybe no, I didn't want a white car. So I said, no, that's not it. I also don't like the trim. And then they said, well, this is a great one. It's easy. It's on the lot. You could leave today with it. And like, I don't know how many times I said no in this conversation, but it was just an awful experience. Like, Gabe, we've talked about your experience with a dealer in the past as well. And it's just not a positive thing that people want to do. Now, if you like to buy cars and sit on the dealer's lot, that's a separate thing. But this week, I decided I was going to upgrade said vehicle. And I bought an EV, and it was all through the Tesla app, right? I even used Apple Pay to pay for this thing, which is, I got to get that 2% cash back. But it
Did
was
you
all
really
through,
use Apple Pay? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
I
Oh,
did.
that's
I'll have to,
amazing.
yeah, that 2% is going to pay for my mattress.
I guess that's true. Yeah, for a large purchase like that, it actually makes a decent.
Well, this is actually funny. Like,
change.
side note here, I started in Firefox, and then I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure you can buy with Apple Pay. So then I switched to Safari, and sure enough, buy with Apple Pay. Anyway,
Nice.
so I did that, and immediately I customized my car, got the exact one I wanted. Immediately shows up in my app. Great, and it shows me the steps to complete my order. Like do this, registration, scan your ID. Do you have a trade-in? Are you financing with us? All these steps. You just continue through them all. And now I'm just waiting for my delivery time. That was my experience of buying this Tesla. It was all done through their mobile app, self-service. Like, it could have been on their website and I would have been happy as well, but it was all this self-service. I didn't have to go to the lot and find something with 100 different options. That always bothers me with Toyota is, oh, they have this XSE, XLE, all these different packages. You don't know what you're buying.
Yeah.
So what Tesla did here is they simplified that transaction. I bought exactly what I wanted. And now, like I said, I check my app 100 times a day for my delivery date. But it was such a seamless buying experience. And Gabe, if you also remember, you had your Tesla before me, but you've had mostly, if not all, positive things to say. So I think you very much influenced my decision to make that purchase. But again, I did so much research on this. At the beginning of the episode, I said, hey, customers will go out and look for alternatives. They will look for the best product or, what matches their needs. And again, that's what I spent the last 10 years of my life doing. And here we are.
Yeah, this is a long customer journey.
Oh, I remember in high school, like when these things came out, thinking like, oh, they're so cool. Like, I was in San Diego once and we went to I don't know what you even call them, a Tesla shop, store, I don't know what it was. And, we checked out like the Model S at the time because that was the only one that was out. And then like the 3 came out, now the Y, the Cybertruck. But it's, again, summing it up, great buying experience. Really hoping there's no hiccups now that I have said that. But Gabe, I appreciate all of the feedback and the advocacy you've given me on the brand.
Yeah, I still love that car. I get, whenever I get in to drive it, and now when I get in my wife's car or a different car that I have to drive, it's amazing how quickly I've gotten used to the technology in the Tesla and how weird and foreign a regular car seems now. It's very unsettling. But yeah, definitely was a good, the only experience that was bad for me is I bought it used versus going to Tesla directly to buy through them. I bought it from a secondary dealer. So that was the part that was frustrating for me, without a doubt. It's so wild to me though, Zach, that, if you think about, I'm sure that most people didn't think that anyone would buy a car through an app. And to have that positive experience where people were willing to do this, and people are willing to do it very frequently, because I think Tesla's one of the more popular cars on the road at this point, right? Certainly the most popular EV. But regardless of what you think about, Tesla, the company, or, the people who run it, they really do think about the customer experience and what that looks like through that purchase process and how easy to make it.
I want to touch on something you said there of like, oh, nobody thought you'd be purchasing this through the app. I took my dad on a test drive a week ago, 2 weeks ago now. And he's always been, and he said this himself, he's always been one of those people that said like, oh, I will never trust like the self-driving or like the lane keeping or anything like that. So we were in Loveland, Colorado, and, we got into a Model X, and I let him drive because he had never driven one. I've already done my demo drives. And, we put in an address in Fort Collins, and it did its full self-driving beta, supervised beta, all the way to Fort Collins. It was great. It did a great job. I actually joked with my sister and said this was his best driving, and he didn't even touch the steering wheel. But
that's hilarious.
And then
just throwing shade at your dad left and right.
Yeah, he doesn't listen to this podcast. We can say no. But then we go back to Loveland. So we take I-25 back to Loveland, and again the full self-driving supervised is on, and he doesn't touch the wheel. And by this point, he's just amazed, right? He is loving this, and I think he went from like a very much a skeptic of the technology to this is impressive what it can do. Now, of course, there's limitations in, the self-driving and how you as the driver need to be present and all of that fine print. But the experience of this demo drive, and the dealer model was really like evident, right? Because with a dealer, you're with a salesperson, they're trying to sell you on the car. With
Sure.
Tesla, the one we walked into, it was very much like, hey, here's the key, like take it, right? And then we came back, and then he said, "Oh, do you want to drive this Cybertruck?" And we said, "Oh yeah, we do." And they said, "Here's the
Obviously.
key. Here's the key. Take it. You have it for the hour." And that was it. They didn't. And then we left, and he said, like, "Hey, how was it?" Kind of thing. And that was the end. There was no like push to buy, and of course, I had already made my decision, but it was just
Well, you know what
a
that
very
is?
great customer experience.
It's confidence in your product or your service. It's the
Mm-hmm.
confidence that your product or service is so good that once people try it, they're going to be like, yeah, this is amazing. I know we've talked about this before, but free trials, that to me shows such a confidence in your product when you can offer somebody a free trial. I'm seeing more and more broadband service providers do this as a way to sort of lower the barrier for entry for people, right? Where, okay, well, hey, we'll money back guarantee, right? Use it for 30 days. And if you don't like it, no problem. We'll come out and swap it out to your old stuff. And to have the confidence of a Tesla, right? To be like, hey, go drive the car. We know you're going to love it. Or, whatever product or service you happen to be selling. I think there's a lot to be said for that, and a lot to be said for how that improves the overall customer experience.
I absolutely agree, and I also test drove a GX 550, and I made that comment. I was like, "Oh, it's going to be very difficult to test drive like a Tesla after driving this, Toyota or this Lexus, and it was very different." But Gabe, we both work in tech. You know me very well. I'm the early adopter, and I've been waiting for this. But enough with that customer experience. We'll continue that on a future episode, I'm sure. But Gabe, NBA. I know. I think you just signed up for an NBA League Pass trial, but I want to talk about that example a little bit.
I did not, but I'm tempted to. Speaking of free
I
trials,
think you should. If your
maybe I
wife's not
should.
listening, I think you
Well,
should.
so this came up with gambling related products as well, which I live in California and none of the app related gambling stuff is legal here, so it's a sort of moot for me. But the story I was telling you, Zach, was I was listening to a podcast, and I listen to a lot of sports podcasts, and on this particular one, they advertise FanDuel and DraftKings. FanDuel is the one that they advertise very aggressively, and the what I loved was, as a promotion for signing up for FanDuel, they offered an NBA League Pass trial. And I thought that was such an interesting way to kind of bundle a customer experience together, where they were saying, hey, use our product. And because you're using our product, in this case, sports gambling, we know that you're probably very into sports. And therefore, we're going to enhance that customer experience by providing you more access to sports, which in this case would be NBA League Pass, so you can watch all the NBA teams whenever the heck you want. But I thought that was so brilliant, just from an experience perspective, to say, okay, we want to acquire you as a customer. And the way we're going to do that is by bundling in this other thing that we know you're very interested in. And I see, to bring this back to a broadband service provider example, I see a lot that broadband service providers offer gift cards or some sort of incentive to get people to sign up for their service. But usually they're just, here's $100, here's $250. It's just a dollar value based on what service you buy and how valuable, quote unquote, they think that customer is going to be. I think there's an awesome opportunity here to think differently about, okay, well, this person's buying a broadband service from me. Maybe I offer them something that's actually going to enhance that broadband experience versus just throwing some cash at them. Maybe it's a subscription to a streaming service. Maybe it's if somebody buys your higher end gaming package, maybe you offer them a free gaming solution, right? Or a free gaming platform. Maybe throw an Oculus at them, right? Something, but tie that purchase to something that you know that they're interested in or that they're very likely to be interested in. I think there's a really interesting opportunity to improve the experience there.
I'm already thinking about all the behavioral data we use in marketing now. Like, the gamer example is always great, and the streaming, and the work from home. But I'm thinking, like, what do gamers want? And I just had this experience this week. I signed up for a BSP, and on their I think it was a 5x5 or 8x8 gig package. They had some like streaming credits and like some additional value added services in there. 1Password, the app was included, which is like my favorite app. But there's all these things that someone who would maybe be shopping for that 8x8 package would be interested in. So
Mm-hmm.
I love seeing them tie in things like that. Now I don't, my BSP doesn't have a gaming specific package, but I think of things like, Xbox Cloud Gaming or,
There you go. Perfect example.
anything else like that, Steam,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much you could do there knowing that this is what your subscribers are interested in. I talked in the beginning about the data. There's the data that's telling us how to segment and how to communicate with these customers.
Well, and you go back to the conversation we were having a little while ago of like making that first impression. That's kind of your opportunity to make that first impression too. And if you're making a really positive impression of, hey, my provider really gets me because they're providing me something that benefits the service that I'm going to purchase. That's a really great first impression that you're driving with a new customer. It's a personalized experience from the jump.
Mm-hmm. And the last one I want to touch on here, and I won't spend too much time on it because we've talked about mattresses enough today. I'm still stressed because
I'm just tired. I want to go lay down and take a nap now.
I know. Well, I can't. I don't have a mattress. No. Zero party data, and Gabe, this is something we talked about. I think when you were mattress shopping initially, because you mentioned like, hey, like check out this mattress, and then like I went to their website and like I took their mattress quick quiz, gave them my email address, so I gave them zero party data that they can now use to market to me as a prospect. And like 2 minutes later, he said, "But watch out because they like spam your inbox." And I'm like, "Well, great, I already signed up." But
sorry, I should have told you that up front.
Yeah, I think that zero party data, though, collecting that email address from your prospects, or in this case, taking the mattress quiz, and how do you sleep? Do you sleep on your back, your side? Do you want like soft? All these questions, and they give you the product recommendation. But now they also have that data on you where they can come back and be like, okay, well, you haven't bought from us, like, what can I target you with? And of course, it's Black Friday season almost. So I keep getting all these Black Friday ads like, oh, this is $200 off, so on. But it's a great time to buy, I feel like. But of course, I have given them that data, and we did a whole episode on zero party data. But I think that's just another great example of marketing we've seen this year, and how it's impacting the customer experience, or in this case, the buyer journey even.
Yeah, and impacting it in a positive way. Ultimately, that's a good experience for the customer because you're personalizing what it is that they're actually going to purchase. So you're leveraging that data that the customer has provided to you to deliver a more personalized experience. When we talk zero party data as well, Zach, I remember us talking about Spotify, and you sign up for Spotify, it starts to ask you about what type of music you are interested in, what type of artists do you listen to, and then it starts to curate and personalize your feed based on those recommendations. That provides a much better customer experience. So, I know people start to freak out about like, oh, customers or, businesses are using data to target me. Yeah. But it should ultimately be used in a beneficial way to provide a better customer experience and a more personalized experience. So provided that it's being leveraged in that way and marketers are using it to do that, I see that as a real positive, not as a negative.
And I always go back to the question of, as a consumer, not as a marketer, as a consumer, would you rather have random ads or personalized ads of things you're interested in? And yeah, there's a big debate there. And it's funny, as I'm shopping for furniture, I've gotten so many furniture ads on Instagram.
Oh my gosh, can't even imagine.
It's actually funny because it'll be like an entertainment stand. I'm like, oh, that looks good, I gotta buy that. And then I open it up and it's like $3,000. Learning a lot. But yeah. Gabe, great episode today. Thanks for everyone for tuning into Buffering. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues, or your mom as well. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with both Gabe and I on